February 1917. The English Channel, 8 miles off the west coast of Guernsey. A German submarine captain peers through his periscope at what appears to be an unremarkable 200-foot coal trader, plodding along at barely 10 knots. UC-18 has sunk 33 ships since early November. The coal trader looks like number 34. The submarine surfaces and fires 2 shots, and 1 strikes the engine room. And then, the coal trader fires back. 5 hidden guns open simultaneously. The first salvo tears through the conning tower. The man standing in it is blown to pieces. A second salvo rips open the pressure hull. When the smoke clears, both vessels have vanished beneath the surface. The German submarine sinks with all 28 hands. The British crew escapes into boats and open rafts, where they spend the next 36 hours singing psalms to fight off hypothermia before a French destroyer rescues them. It remains the only known incident in naval history where a Q-ship and a U-boat destroyed each other simultaneously. And for 107 years, nobody could find either wreck. The Admiralty recorded the battle in one location. The ships went down in another, 40 miles away. It took until 2024 for a Guernsey dive team to discover what really happened that morning. But Lady Olive was not an isolated case. She was one of roughly 200 British vessels that fought one of the strangest, most theatrical, and most morally complicated campaigns of the First World War. These were warships disguised as helpless merchant ships. Crews performed elaborate pantomimes of cowardice while sitting silently at hidden guns. Officers deliberately steered their vessels into incoming torpedoes to maintain a disguise. 7 Victoria Crosses were awarded for Q-ship service, the highest concentration of that honor for any single type of operation in the war. But the story of how these ships came to exist, what they actually achieved, and what they may have accidentally caused, is far more troubling than the official record suggests. The Q-ship program was born from desperation. By autumn 1914, German U-boats were proving devastatingly effective against Allied merchant shipping, and the Royal Navy had almost nothing to fight back with. Depth charges would not become available until 1916. Admiral Sir John Fisher, head of the Royal Navy, had dismissed Germany's 28 submarines as toys and playthings. That assessment was proving catastrophically wrong. On the 26th of November, 1914, Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, sent a telegram to Admiral Sir Hedworth Moo at Portsmouth. The message was brief and direct. A small or moderate-sized steamer should be fitted secretly with concealed guns, crewed by disguised naval personnel, and sent to sea as bait. The concept had a precedent stretching back centuries. HMS Kingfisher had used a similar deception against Algerian pirates as far back as 1681. Gordon Campbell, who would become the most famous Q-ship commander of the war, later wrote that the mystery ships were no invention of the war, as attempts to decoy the enemy are as old as can be. The first Q-ships entered service that same month. The British Victoria and the French Marguerite began patrolling sea lanes, disguised as ordinary merchantmen. By 1915, 29 more were operational. Admiral Sir Lewis Bailey, commanding from Queenstown in Ireland, eventually had over 140 Q-ships under his authority. The name itself derives from Queenstown, their primary home port. Traditional naval officers thought the entire scheme was absurd. The decoy fleet was derided as the Gilbert and Sullivan Navy, but it had high-ranking supporters in Churchill and Admiral David Beatty, and the submarine losses kept mounting. The deception mechanics were extraordinary. Q-ships carried formidable hidden arsenals. Standard armament was typically a 4-inch gun and 2 12-pounder guns, though some carried considerably more. HMS Pargust mounted 5 guns and 2 torpedo tubes. The weapons were concealed through elaborate engineering. Hinged bulwarks dropped on command with a lever jerk, disclosing loaded guns ready to fire. Dummy lifeboats split open like walnuts to reveal 12-pounder guns. Fake hen coops concealed Maxim machine guns on hinged walls. False deck houses had walls that fell away in an instant. To survive torpedo hits, cargo holds were filled with buoyant materials: timber, empty casks, balsa wood, and cork. Perforated steam lines around engine room hatchways could simulate damage with dense clouds of steam. Wireless aerials were painted to resemble ordinary manila rope. Crew wore no uniforms, not even Navy-issued flannel underwear, because if spotted drying on a washing line, it would betray the disguise. Ships carried what was called a board of lies, a blackboard listing a fictitious name, port of registry, and cargo details so crew could answer any questions convincingly. Some vessels sailed under 5 different names during the war. But the real genius was the performance. International law required U-boats to surface, identify themselves, and allow crews to abandon ship before sinking a merchant vessel. Q ships turned this legal obligation into a death trap. When a U-boat appeared, roughly half the crew would theatrically abandon ship, while the other half remained hidden in complete silence at concealed gun positions. The panic party, as it was called, was pure theater. Men ran about frantically gathering personal gear. Lifeboats were lowered with deliberate clumsiness. One man always put on the skipper's coat and cap, so the captain would be seen leaving. Props included a stuffed parrot in a cage carried by the cook, a sailor clutching a pet black cat as he scrambled into a lifeboat, and on some vessels, men dressed as women from the waist up only, since they would only be viewed through a periscope at distance. Special effects supplemented the act. Explosive-filled tin canisters fired near German shell strikes simulated direct hits. Tubs of dried seaweed were lit on fire to make the ship appear ablaze. The hidden crew then waited in absolute silence, sometimes for over an hour, while the U-boat circled and observed through its periscope. When the submarine finally surfaced and closed to optimal range, typically between 100 and 400 yards, the captain gave the order. The white ensign was hoisted. This was a strict legal requirement. Under the Hague Conventions, failure to display true colors before firing would classify Q-ship crews as irregular fighters outside the laws of war. Hinged panels dropped, and all guns opened fire simultaneously. Q-ship deception was a legal and moral tightrope, and it could be deadly. No one personified Q-ship warfare more than Gordon Campbell. Born in 1886 as the 9th son and the 13th of 16 children, he entered the Royal Navy as a cadet and passed 59th out of 65 in his class. Not the most promising start. He was given command of HMS Farnborough on Trafalgar Day, the 21st of October, 1915. On the 22nd of March, 1916, Campbell achieved his first major success. U-68 fired a torpedo that missed Farnborough's bow. Campbell maintained course and speed as though nothing had happened. When the U-boat surfaced 1,000 yards astern and fired a warning shot, Campbell stopped engines and launched the panic party. At 800 yards, he raised the white ensign and opened fire. 21 shells hit in rapid succession. As U-68 began to sink, Campbell steered directly over the submarine's position and dropped a depth charge, reportedly the first successful use of depth charges in naval combat. His signal to Admiral Bailey afterwards became legendary. It read simply, "Have sunk enemy submarine. Shall I return to report or look for another?" But it was the engagement on the 17th of February 1917 that earned Campbell the Victoria Cross and defined his legend. In the North Atlantic, Farnborough sighted a torpedo track. What Campbell did next was almost unbelievable. He deliberately altered course to ensure the torpedo struck his own ship. It hit aft by the engine room bulkhead. The panic party abandoned ship. Below decks, the engineer officer reported the engine room was flooding. Campbell ordered him to remain at his post. The man did, along with several severely wounded crew members, as water rose around their legs. U-83 spent an agonizing period observing through its periscope at just 200 yards. The submarine passed so close that its entire hull was visible beneath the surface. Campbell's hidden crew, some of them wounded, some of them standing in rising water, did not move, did not speak, did not flinch. When U-83 finally surfaced roughly 300 yards off the port bow, Campbell waited until every gun could bear at point-blank range. Almost all 45 shells fired hit the target. The very first shot reportedly decapitated the German captain, Kapitänleutnant Bruno Hopp. Of 37 German crew, 35 perished. Farnborough was also sinking. Campbell's famous signal read, "Q5 slowly sinking respectfully wishes you goodbye." Destroyers arrived within an hour. The ship was towed to Mill Cove and beached. Campbell's Victoria Cross citation was deliberately vague to protect Q-ship secrecy. Newspapers called it the Mystery Victoria Cross, the first instance of that honor being deliberately shrouded in secrecy. On the 7th of June 1917, Campbell fought again from HMS Pargust. When UC-29 torpedoed the engine room, the explosion loosened the gun covers. Seaman William Williams physically took the full weight of the starboard gun port on himself, holding it in place for over 30 minutes to prevent it falling and revealing the hidden gun beneath. When UC-29 finally surfaced just 50 yards away, Campbell opened fire. The submarine sank at 8:40 that morning. Campbell was offered a bar to his Victoria Cross, which would have made him the first naval officer to receive one. He declined. He said the Victoria Cross he wore was on behalf of his crew and through no special act of his own. Instead, under the Royal Warrants ballot provision, his officers elected Lieutenant Ronald Stewart and his ratings elected Seaman William Williams. Both received the Victoria Cross. Williams would survive being torpedoed 3 times. He became known as the most decorated seaman of the Great War, and he lived until 1965. If you are finding this deep dive into British naval deception interesting, consider subscribing. It costs nothing, it takes a second, and it helps the channel continue these investigations into military history. Now, back to what happened when the deception turned dark. Not every Q-ship engagement was heroic. And here is where the official record starts to come apart. On the 19th of August, 1915, HMS Baralong, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Godfrey Herbert, approached U-27 in the waters south of Ireland. U-27 had stopped the British steamer SS Nicosia in accordance with prize rules. The German captain, Kapitänleutnant Bernhard Wegener, had allowed the crew and passengers to board lifeboats. He was following the law. Herbert approached flying the American flag. At half a mile, Baralong signaled she was going to rescue Nicosian's crew. Wegener acknowledged and ceased firing. Herbert steered Baralong along Nicosian's starboard side, while U-27 passed along the port side. The moment the U-boat disappeared behind the merchant ship, Herbert hauled down the American flag, hoisted the white ensign, and unmasked 3 12-pounder guns. When U-27 came into view from Nicosian's bow, Baralong opened fire at 600 yards, firing 34 rounds. U-27 rolled over and sank. What happened next crossed a line that no official history can explain away. About a dozen German crewmen escaped the sinking submarine. Herbert ordered his Royal Marines to shoot the survivors in the water. Wegener himself was shot while swimming. 5 Germans who reached Nicosia were hunted down in the engine room and propeller shaft tunnel and killed. Every single member of the U-27 crew perished, either in the sinking or executed afterwards. American muleteers aboard Nicosia witnessed the killings. When they returned to the United States in October 1915, 6 made sworn depositions before notaries public. Germany delivered a formal diplomatic memorandum on the 6th of December 1915, demanding Herbert and his crew be tried for murder. The British government's response was not justice. It was a cover-up. Baralong was renamed HMS Wyandra and transferred to the Mediterranean. Her name was deleted from Lloyd's Register. Nicosia was renamed Novitian. The crew were issued new discharge books with the voyage omitted. Herbert's name was placed on Prussia's official blacklist. Germany struck commemorative propaganda medals depicting the killings. A Kriegsmarine submarine flotilla formed in 1938 was named Wegener in memory of the commander of U-27, demonstrating that the propaganda value of the incident persisted into the Nazi era. The Baralong incident raises a question that the Admiralty never publicly addressed. How many other such incidents occurred that were never witnessed by neutral observers? The nature of Q-ship warfare, fighting under disguise in remote waters, made oversight virtually impossible. But the consequences of Q-ship warfare extended far beyond individual atrocities. The entire program created an escalation spiral that may have done more damage than the U-boats it was designed to fight. Consequences were broad and lasting. The logic was simple and devastating. Q-ships exploited prize rules to ambush surfacing U-boats, so U-boat commanders stopped following prize rules. They began favoring submerged torpedo attacks over surface approaches, eliminating the vulnerability Q-ships exploited. That meant torpedoing merchant ships without warning, and genuine unarmed merchant sailors were being killed without a chance to abandon ship. Historian Lawrence Sondhaus of the University of Indianapolis argued that Q-ships probably did more harm than good. By disguising warships as merchant vessels, they made U-boat commanders suspicious of every merchant ship, incentivizing attacks without warning against vessels that were exactly what they appeared to be. The combination of Q-ships, armed merchantmen, and false flag tactics gave Germany its primary justification for unrestricted submarine warfare. That policy was declared on the 1st of February, 1917. That declaration was the single most consequential naval decision of the war. It brought America into the conflict on the 6th of April, 1917. Unrestricted warfare changed the course of the war. The weapon designed to protect British merchant shipping may have been the catalyst for the policy that killed the most British merchant sailors. The statistics reinforce this uncomfortable conclusion. Roughly 200 Q-ships fought approximately 150 engagements over the course of the war. They confirmed the destruction of between 11 and 15 U-boats. In return, between 27 and 38 Q-ships were lost. Q-ships accounted for under 10% of all U-boats sunk. Sea mines alone were responsible for roughly 30%. Statistics tell a stark story. More damning, about half of all Q-ship successes occurred in a brief window between June and September 1915, before German awareness of the program spread through the submarine flotillas. By 1917, Q-ships sank only 3 submarines, compared to approximately 28 destroyed by conventional warships. After September 1917, no U-boats were confirmed sunk by Q-ships. The convoy system, introduced in May 1917, proved vastly more effective and increasingly rendered Q-ships obsolete. The post-war Admiralty concluded that the effectiveness of the Q-ship initiative had been greatly overrated, and that skilled seamen had been diverted from more productive duties. Convoy tactics ultimately proved decisive. When war returned in 1939, the Admiralty tried again. 9 Q-ships were commissioned in September and October. Gordon Campbell himself was recalled by Churchill to oversee the program. The results were catastrophic. HMS Prunella was torpedoed and sunk on the 21st of June 1940 without ever sighting a U-boat. HMS Edgehill followed 8 days later. The remaining vessels were paid off by March 1941, with 0 successful engagements. The Americans tried next with Project LQ. USS Attic sailed on the 23rd of March, 1942. 3 days later, U-123 torpedoed her. All 141 crew members perished. Total American Q-ship casualties reached 148 personnel, 1/4 of all who served. The most hazardous branch of the United States Navy. The deception that had worked when U-boats followed prize rules was useless when they simply torpedoed without warning from the start. And yet, the story refuses to end where the Admiralty filed it. In 2024, after a 4-year search, a Guernsey-based dive team led by filmmaker Carl Taylor found the wrecks of Lady Olive and UC-18. The breakthrough came not from naval archives, but from consulting local fishermen about where their trawler gear kept snagging on the seabed. Maritime archaeologist Thomas Termote identified shell impact holes and battle damage to UC-18's conning tower, confirming Simpson's wartime diary entry that the chap in the conning tower had been blown to bits. An Imperial German Navy propeller stamp verified the submarine's identity. Lady Olive was found nearby, upside down. Q-ships turned over when sinking because the weight of their concealed guns made them top-heavy. The wrecks lay 40 miles west of the traditionally recorded battle location. For 107 years, historians had been looking in the wrong place. The French government designated UC-18 a no-dive war grave. The German War Graves Commission contacted surviving family members, including a man named Andreas Kuffner, whose grandfather's brother Hans had served as stoker aboard UC-18. A BBC documentary aired in October 2024. The Smithsonian published their feature in February 2025. The Q-ship story is one of extraordinary contradictions. These were warships pretending to be victims. Their crews expressed courage not through action, but through agonizing stillness, sitting silently at hidden guns while torpedoes struck, fires raged, and water rose around them. The stuffed parrot in its cage perfectly captures the absurdist theater of the entire enterprise. Campbell declining his second Victoria Cross because the first belonged to his crew. Williams holding gun covers on his shoulders for 30 minutes while his ship sank. Sanders, the New Zealand lieutenant who never once wore his Victoria Cross before being killed with his entire crew when HMS Prize was torpedoed on the 14th of August, 1917. There were no survivors, no wreckage, and no bodies ever recovered. He was 34 years old. And alongside those acts of extraordinary bravery, the Baralong massacre, the cover-up, the escalation spiral that arguably cost more merchant lives than it saved. 11 to 15 U-boats sunk against 27 to 38 Q-ships lost. A program whose greatest tactical success lasted barely 4 months before the enemy adapted, and whose strategic legacy may have been to accelerate the very catastrophe it was built to prevent. 200 ships, 7 Victoria Crosses, 107 years of a mystery that was solved 40 miles from where anyone thought to look. The helpless merchant ships that hunted German U-boats were never helpless, and they were never simple. That was British engineering. That was the Q-ship war. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Our community stretches across the entire world. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you are here. Click the video on the left to watch how this cheap and nasty warship destroyed everything.